And good evening, everyone. Welcome to Arcane Radio. I'm Sean, the Fort Shop Forker. As always, joined by Lon Strickler and our good friend Butch Wachowski. Gentlemen, good evening. Welcome to tonight's program.
Good evening, sir.
And we got a real good show tonight, guys. Dark Waters returns for his second appearance on the program, and knock on wood or for Mike or whatever you got, it's going to go without a hitch.
Hope we can only hope so, you know.
Yeah, definitely.
I have my candles burning.
Good. We need all the good juju we can get. Well, what a busy week it's been for most of us here. I don't have a whole lot to write home about in terms of kind of any recent activity coming my way. That being said, some very interesting things you've posted out there this week on Phantoms and Monsters. I had a brain fart there. And some big things getting ready to go on with the Pa Bigfoot Society as we kind of change things up and become something a little different. So, Lon, kick us off so we can discuss some good Phantoms and Monsters.
Well, last week I told everyone that I had, I didn't have time to read it, but I had that New Jersey Devil, the Jersey Devil encounter that somebody wrote to me about. It was actually, it wasn't written to me. It was actually on Darkness Radio, and it was transcribed for me. And a pretty interesting story. I mean, you get your Jersey Devil sightings, but this one's a little bit different. So let me read this. Guy said, I currently live in central Illinois, but I was born and raised in New Jersey, the Pine Barrens. Growing up there, we all heard the stories, the encounters with the Jersey Devil. My grandma had encounter along with that. Pretty much anyone who's ever lived there knows someone who claims to have seen this creature. Now, I even have a former boss who staged a prank on his friend that ended up getting reported as a Jersey Devil sighting back in the 70s. He never told his friend it was all a prank, so I think it's still an official sighting on the books. He said, anyway, I spent my childhood years riding around on my four-wheeler in gentleman's territory. No more fear of coming across the New Jersey Devil than I would coming across a poorly concealed corpse dumped by the mob. Flash forward to my teen years. I'm working on a blueberry farm in Horton State Forest with my brother's girlfriend, Janice. She didn't have a driver's license at the time, so I usually ended up driving her back and forth to work every day. We usually worked well past dinner time, and this particular story took place in a few days in the early days of the fall. That evening, if you have sunset, the farm we worked on was pretty deep in the middle of nowhere, and the farm she lived on was even deeper in the middle of nowhere. To get to our house, we had to drive through some pretty thick forest on gravel roads with no street lights. It would freak anyone out, I suppose, but I was used to driving through the dark woods, so it was never anything there that really bothered me. I got Janice safely to her house, went inside, exchanged some pleasantries with her parents, and then shortly made my way home. I was on the last stretch of road before the main highway that would take me to the end of town. That's when I was overcome with the creepiest feeling. I can't describe it any other way than that. I just felt like I was being watched. So like a dumb I am, I stopped the car. My doors were locked, and I had this big wrench underneath my seat. I knew how to swing and make it hurt if I needed to. I'm still in jail. So they're scanning the road ahead of me, and I can't really see anything other than the 30 to 40-year-old blueberry bushes on either side of the road. If you climb pretty astonishing height. With these tall bushes lining the road, I really couldn't see too far into the forest around me. After looking for a few seconds, I popped back in the car and popped it back in gear. I slowly started pulling down the road again. That's when I noticed movement on top of one of these tall bushes. I stopped the car again and immediately started staring in that direction. Once I focused my eyes, I could clearly see something very large crouching on the top of one blueberry bush. I couldn't make out any detail as far as colors or facial or body details, but it was something clearly silhouetted against the bright starry sky. What could make it something larger than a man with a head, a huge head, sitting in a half crouch position, almost like it was ready to spring from its hind legs. I sat and stared at it for what seemed like an eternity. I was baffled how something that big could sit on top of a blueberry bush like that. As I said before, these bushes are old and tall, but they're not very sturdy. They grow almost like garden hedge, so anything couldn't possibly be sitting on top of them without breaking the branches or tearing the bushes all to hell. In my concentration staring at whatever it was in the bushes, I accidentally let my foot off the clutch, and the car stalled the engine. Such a stupid move. I can honestly tell you, I came very close to almost soiling myself right there and then. This is the wrong move. Right there, in any horror, don't let your car die in the middle of the woods while some creature is stalking you anyway. I think the sound of my car startled it because the thing's head whipped around to stare right at me. Just as it took off in one swift motion, and it was gone from my sight. As it was taking off, I didn't exactly see any wings on the back, but I heard a loud whooshing sound like large wings make. In addition to hearing this, I can make out some very powerful that at the knees like horses' legs would do. I used them, and it used them, and the assumed wings on its back to disappear from the sight in a second. Since the car was now stalled and quiet, I could hear a loud screech and whoosh of the air above me that grew fainter within seconds. Whatever this thing was, it was fast and was powerful. I know I weirdly kept talking about blueberry bushes, but I swear they are important to this story. As this creature was taking off from me, those bushes almost bent in half as it jumped off of them, and I sat there watching them thrash and sway for quite a few moments after the creature was gone. Whatever was up there was still on there, with that branches to get them crashing around like crazy once it leaped off of them. Needless to say, it freaked the hell out. I was freaked the hell out, got the car started, threw it back into gear, and swung around the road, heading back to the safety of Janice's house, all within moments of this thing screeching away from me. I must have looked like a crazy person. When I showed up back at the house, I drove over the railroad ties in the drive, left my driver's side door open, and just barged into people's house. I started babbling to Janice's dad about what I just seen, and he calmly told me I must have seen the Jersey Devil. He drove me back to the spot where I had seen it, and he confirmed that it was definitely a disturbance in the bushes on that side of the road. He told me that he had sighted the setting to his wife or daughters so they wouldn't freak out. Needless to say, I let the cat out of the bag on it, but he really didn't seem to mind. I think he was happy to have someone else bolster his own sightings on land. So there you go.
You know, my question is, Lon, there's people over the years that have reported seeing the Jersey Devil, but wasn't the Jersey Devil all just a hoax? Wasn't it made up?
I don't know exactly what it is. You know, it's been a, you know, the legend it was like a baby that was born in the Leeds house back in the mid 1700s, and this thing grew up, and you know, there people have been seeing it ever since. I mean, there tracks of something on, you know, people's houses in the snow, in the yard in the snow, people seeing it. I've heard of all kinds of different sizes of it, and you know, the description is basically that it's got a horse's head and hind legs with wings, and it's about the size of a deer. And it's got hooves.
You know, these things just aren't supposed to exist, and these
No.
deformities. I mean, that's one genetic freak, if that's really what we're dealing with here. And perhaps there's an element of fantasy about it. Perhaps there is something there. We may have to check it out one day. I mean, in the Pine Barrens, it wouldn't be that uncommon to find a dead body from the mob, but what these folks seeing definitely isn't a dead body.
I don't know. It's you know, I think the sightings are interesting. They're you know, not long somebody supposedly have gotten a picture of one of these things. And basically it kind of looked like a goat with wings.
Yeah, that's the problem with technology today, though, is that you know, Photoshop is getting better and better. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh, you can't rely on photos.
No, sir.
You really can't.
No.
You know, it nothing. I mean, it's just like people that come up with big ideas.
Butch, what's your take?
I don't know. It's been a long time since I read that story, but I kind of remember it as being a hoaxed photo of the creature. But, you know, I'm not too apt to say that stuff as quick as I used to. There's just some things out there that we just can't explain.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, the more and more we, you know, talk about these things each and every week, and we get the reports, and we go over this stuff. You know, some weeks I'm really torn about some stuff being incredibly good, and some weeks I'm like, I don't know. I guess it's just what we deal with on a weekly basis through here, Line U on a daily basis. I mean, you get this stuff all the time, so. But at some point, I guess we need to start getting some information together and maybe going out and investigate one of these for ourselves.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, it's been a while since I've been in that area, but I tell you, for whatever reason, I'm getting some real crazy stories from South.
But yeah, we're gonna have to go out and investigate some of these, and I think it's gonna be. I think we're gonna have a lot of fun doing it. I mean, Butch, you've been all over the state so far, anyhow, investigating the recent dogman sightings and really getting out there and checking out areas and finding interesting things.
Well, right now we're just doing the preliminary work, which is, you know, find the location, see where we're going to set up, talk to some people, talk to some witnesses, take some photographs, look at some topo areas, see if we can put any connections between, you know, one sighting to another. And then actually when the weather cools off, which will be pretty much, you know, end of the last week of September or starting in early October the first week, then we're going to hit it hard. And we'll be out staying at, well, the first 6 places I have picked out. And we'll probably be gone for about a week and a half maybe.
Now, is this just because that time seems to be when these sightings are happening more often, or?
Well, yeah, it's, you know, that over the summer it dropped off. And, you know, when we first got the first one, it was November. And then, you know, they followed up with another one that was a little later, but still winter. So I'm not real easy with walking into woods where I can't see. I mean, some of these wooded areas are so thick with the leaves and stuff now. I mean, you can't even see. And you look into the wooded area, and it's like looking into a dark closet. I mean, you can't see anything. So hopefully with the brush and the trees shedding and stuff like that, we'll get a better view and may be able to spot a few places that we didn't see before. And right now in the one area, there's quite a number of caves and old mines, which are very close to 2 very good sighting reports. So we're going to concentrate on those 2 first. And the one gentleman is going to put us in the direction of the mines and caves, which are not far from the sighting at all.
I think people forget how remote some parts of Pennsylvania really are.
Oh, man.
Butch, until they get out there. And when you look at some of these dogman sightings at the time of year, you know, foliage is usually down, but that does not stop the thickness of some of the brush in terms of just the density of stick, and you really lose your depth of field and your line of sight pretty quickly still. I mean, some of that underbrush is still really thick, whether it's alive or not.
Oh, yeah. And some of those bushes, they're 4, 5, 6 foot tall. And, they don't do anything. They're just there. And they can obscure you just like looking at through a bunch of trees. I mean, it's like you said, you lose your line of sight, you lose your depth perception. And the same thing is going to happen with cameras. So with the new type of cameras we got, we're hoping that we can kill that by just setting everything at infinity and take it from there.
Definitely. And, some of these sightings, the time sightings on these is interesting because to me they also correspond to a lot of Bigfoot sightings in this particular area. I mean, just the time of year. And, we've speculated for some time that, maybe that there's more of a connection between the two of those than what we originally suspected as well.
Yeah, I agree. Because some of the areas we have, the historical Bigfoot sightings in those areas is pretty impressive.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I'm really anxious to see what's going to come from these investigations, Butch. I mean, it's been a year since we've really been getting these reports in and really going over them and reading these stories and these encounters. It's going to be interesting to see what happens from these investigations.
Mm-hmm. Well, and another thing it's helping us out by doing this stuff now in advance is it's going to let me know how many people we actually need to field.
Yeah.
Are we going to attack it at just one area, or are we going to spread out over maybe a couple acres and, just be radio communicated with and watching a much larger picture?
There's something funny about that, too, and that's that folks are really anxious to volunteer to go Bigfoot investigating, but you throw a dogman out there and they start reading some of these reports, I imagine some of them are going to start backing off. Like, maybe I'm better at doing armchair on this than being out there in the brush.
I don't have a very long list of volunteers.
Yeah, it's a hard one. It's definitely not your daddy's Bigfoot. I'll tell you that. It's really, reports of this being, and not that we ever want to paint anything with a nefarious brush. That being said, the reports we get is usually accompanied by a menacing feel, a feel of dread, and that they're not safe.
Mm-hmm. There have been some aggressive behavior out of some of these things. So
and that adds another dimension to this. You're not talking about going out there. At least when I'm Bigfoot, researching Bigfoot and Squatch and whatever they want to call it these days, there's always that, peace of mind in the back of your head that, any real violent interactions are very uncommon, and, most of those sighting reports probably aren't all that credible, et cetera, et cetera. But you start reading all these reports of Dogman, and you're out there in the woods in the middle of the night, and it's 1 a.m., and you start hearing things, and the next thing you know, your mind's preparing you to be set up for a hot lunch. So
yeah.
Or a cold lunch. It's a different mentality, I guess. And I don't know, man. You start getting people there volunteering up, and I'm just anxious to see the list.
It's like I said, it's very short. But I'm hoping, that when we finally put out what we want to do and how we're going to do it, that maybe we'll get some more volunteers. Because, one of the things that somebody brought up was that if Bigfoot and this bipedal canine exist in the same area, there may be just as good a chance as photographing or finding, the big fella.
Yeah, but what I think is odd about that is that you have two, what we could almost call them super predators, competing for food in the same space. And at some point, that's a recipe for disaster.
But, when you look at that space, and that has come up a couple times, we come back to the part that where you're at, and to say you got a couple competing predators like that, you're looking at 6,700 acres. I mean, so, the chance of them bumping into each other at the corner store is kind of remote. And then again, we may be all wet in that thinking.
Yeah, well, I mean, and the thing that, we have to look into is possible population, numbers. Are we, what's that look like? What is the ratio of Bigfoot per acre? or dogman per acre, and that's something that we don't know. We have no way of knowing any of that information.
Yeah,
and it could be one in that whole area, or a small number in that entire area. And if they're migratory, that throws something else into it.
Yeah, when you look at the area in overall, the Lichen Loop, is relatively small. And then you got to take all the towns and little boroughs and stuff out of there and narrow it down to all the game lands. Well, if it's staying in the game lands, which it can jump from one to the other, I mean, they're all attached one way or another, you would have to think it's possible that it could be one, or it's possible that you could have two, but we never have sightings that are that close in time and date. They're always a month apart or 6 or 8 weeks apart, and then they're not very far from the sighting that was prior to that.
I'd be anxious to know if there were any sort of police reports of a unknown prowler or anything else reported during those times, like maybe close to those dates from local police.
Well, I did check the archives in the hotspots, newspaper archives of anything from missing persons to lost hunters to campers having an issue with something, and I couldn't find anything. And I would think that if anything like that, where somebody encountered something they didn't know, or maybe the Game Commission said, well, it could have been a bear or something like that. I mean, there wasn't even any reports of that where campers encountered a bear.
Yeah, and I don't know. Maybe something there. I don't know. It's not that I'm picking anything up or clairvoyant. It just seems to me like that might be an area worth exploring. These small towns don't usually have really large police departments. Most of them are very rural, so that there's a. You know what I'm trying to say.
Well, most of them are under 3,000 or less in population.
Yeah.
Everybody doesn't work in town; they work out of town, and local police departments are sparse in those areas.
Exactly. Some of them are only part-time, and they rely on state police or what else to fill in the gaps. And what I'm thinking at those times is these real remote rural towns in these rural areas, they could be having activity through this loop that we wouldn't know about unless somebody started reporting a strange person walking around on their property at an odd time of day or.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree. And
even in daylight, I'm not convinced that these things don't move around in the day.
Well, we're getting daylight sightings.
Oh, we've had daylight sightings, yeah.
And traveling, I mean, from place to place, anywhere that's, got dense cover, sometimes that dense cover lets up. Are folks seeing it then? I don't know. I'm starting to get a lot of questions about this because I really think there's something to this. I really do. I mean, the people are seeing something. I don't think it's a misidentification.
I think they do travel. I mean, this is my theory is that I think they do either migrate or travel. And in the case of here in central PA, I think they stick to the valleys for the most part on these ridges and, into the valleys and move south and north, back and forth. I look at a lot of the reports are actually in valleys.
Yeah.
Along these ridge lines. And they go down, down in West Virginia or just up into, but they don't go too much further than North Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. But it's mostly concentrated in the South. Now, of course, we get sightings all over the state, but it just seems like the large number of sightings, recent sightings, are in the valleys along the ridges. So I don't know if that's specifically where they stick at. I don't know. I don't know if it's I think they try to concentrate in those areas.
Well, I tell you what, the valleys have been really humid and warm this summer.
Yeah.
So for a large being or a large creature, it might not be that conducive to comfort. It might be in some of those maybe a little bit higher elevations where it could be just a little cooler. And precipitation in the state's been down this month. Half the state's under drought watch or drought warning.
I know. Yeah.
Well, it's like when we were up in Clearfield. We were on the mountain, And off to, if we were facing the mountain, off to our left, there's a really deep valley that was an old railroad train set up years and years ago. And right next to that is within 20 feet, I guess, is a running stream. But to get down there, there's no way you get a vehicle down there. I mean, you might make it with an ATV, but you're not going to make it with a truck or a car, or even a four-wheel drive pickup truck. I don't think you can do it. But and it goes all the way, runs the whole length of that mountain as far as you can see. And when you look at a topo map, I mean, you're looking at a ravine. So that thing could be running up and down that ravine, and nobody's going to see it because you can't see the ravine unless you walk up to the a pipeline that was above us and cross that pipeline, and then start veering to your left, and then you can see some of it, but then you can see that the old tracks go straight down into that ravine. That would be a perfect hiding place.
Yeah.
Well, Pennsylvania's got a feature that a lot of states don't have. Down in the valleys, you got these long roots in these areas, and I mean, it provides a lot of good cover.
It does. Pennsylvania's just like you said, it's got a lot of cover and some of those key areas. And the other thing is, there's a lot of those power line cutouts and pipeline that's running through these things. There's a lot of area you could make it through with the least amount of resistance and cover a lot of ground. And if these things are as fast as they are, they could do it really quick.
Oh, yeah. Easily. And, like I said, all these state game lands, with the exception of you might have to cross a road here or there or go around a little burrow or something like that, they're all connected. There's very few homes and businesses or anything between these state game lands. Just like Penfield. I mean, you can cross from one state park and cross the other side of Penfield, and you're in another state park.
Mm-hmm.
But so, before I forget, what were you going to tell us about the PA Bigfoot Society?
Yeah, so I'm going to break it here first. With everything going on in the state of Pennsylvania and research going the way it is, the PA Bigfoot Society has changed leadership. Once again, it's restructured. We had our annual meeting a couple weeks ago, and we made some decisions that the Keystone Bigfoot Project and the PA Bigfoot Society are going to merge. And in order to build a stronger, more stable future for the research in Pennsylvania, we're going to go under the Keystone Bigfoot Project moniker. So the PBS will now become the KBP, and it's going to be a wild time. A lot of the members are excited, some a little ambivalent of the change. We did it to drive some confusion. A lot of groups out there that are the Pennsylvania Bigfoot something or the Pennsylvania something society, and we needed to clear it up so folks knew exactly where they were going and who they were dealing with, and try to drive away all the ambiguity as much as possible, and kind of built off its own legacy. So the changes are going to be rolled out incrementally. So stay tuned. PABigfootsociety.com, KeystoneBigfoot.com to be abreast of the changes. I stepped down as the director. I'm going to be doing all the social media and public relations stuff. And we installed a new administrator, Dave Rupert, and we got a team of coordinators and a lot of investigators that are going to be hitting the grounds to get things done, guys. I'm real excited about it.
Well, that's how it works out. I mean, there needs to be some continuity.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest problem. And, following up on reports and
well, how
such.
many reports we get, Lon. We get a lot of reports that come through.
Yeah, we get a hell of a lot of reports.
And sometimes that they're good reports, and other times they're bogus. But Pennsylvania's a big state, and a one-man or two-man running the whole show just it didn't work. And I'm speaking from experience. I know. It just didn't work. It was overwhelming. So we broke it down, and we got different people in different areas who are leveraging each other's strengths, and I think it's going to be the best iteration that this group has seen in a very long time.
Very good.
I'm excited about it. But before we get too excited, our guest tonight, guys, I'm really looking forward to this one. Dark Waters, as he is known by his listeners and subscribers, is a master storyteller following the traditions of the greatest oral narrators. Dark Water's combination of Southern vernacular and true encounters create a unique gumbo of realistic yet entertaining content. His down-to-earth mannerisms and personality has led him to appearances on Coast to Coast AM, Darkness Radio, and many other paranormal talk shows. Dark Waters is quickly becoming a fan favorite in the horror and paranormal world, and you can go to YouTube and search Dark Waters to pull up his channel, and we'll put his channel on the website so you folks can get better acquainted. When we come back from this brief break, we'll be back with Dark Waters. Stay tuned, everybody. And good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Arcane Radio. I'm Sean, the Fort Shop Forker, with Butch Witkowski and Lon Strickler tonight. And, of course, we have on the line with us our good friend Dark Waters. DW, thanks for joining us again here this evening.
I appreciate you having me on, and I listen to your conversation. I love your show, and I'm an avid listener, so I appreciate you having me back. And I'm ready to do kind of a tell-all interview with you guys. So any question you want to ask is on the table. Anything you want to know, I'm not going to hold back tonight because I think there's some things that need to be put out there that haven't been put out there because I've been quiet for a while listening, and it's crazy some of the things that are going on. So whatever you guys have, shoot. I have a couple of stories for you guys. I got one from Lon's blog, Phantoms, and video collaboration we're doing, and then I got some personal stories that's been happening to me over the past 2 weeks, and I got a lot of stuff for you guys, so this is going to be exciting. It's really going to be exciting.
Well, fantastic. And, of course, we're glad you joined us, and we're glad you're an avid listener. My question for you, DW, and I didn't get to ask you this the last time, but being a master storyteller is a pretty tough gig. What got you started? What was your impetus to become a master storyteller?
Well, I mean, the skills of telling stories is something that I learned from my mentor, a guy named Joe Baker, in the late 90s. He was teaching me how to communicate in these communication techniques, and he had this one rule, is if you wanted to make a point to someone, you never told that person that point directly. You always told it to them in a story because it was easy for that person to accept the point that you were making. So my communication style evolved into a style where I would tell a quick story from my personal life of something if I wanted to make a point to someone. I would never say, hey, don't cross that street because there's drug dealers on that corner. I would say, hey, the last guy that went across that street, I remember what happened to him, blah, 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 blah. And then I would tell a story. So that's how I first started developing my storytelling skills. Then it evolved to me hanging out with my friends in the early 2000s, in the late 2000s when we were doing real estate and a whole bunch of great business opportunities where money was rolling and drinks were flowing and women were everywhere. And I'm a shorter, bald-head guy, and all my friends were these model-type men, 6'4", 6'5" athletes. And those guys were amazingly handsome. And so I had to be able to tell a story to captivate an audience in order to make sure I got my fair share of attention. And you just develop those skills over time to tell a good story, something that you grow into when you develop over time. And that's how I developed those skills. Now, how we start talking about getting to telling the kind of horror stories and the scary things is, I've had my fair share of paranormal encounters, starting from when I was a young boy all the way up until like last week, which is last 2 weeks I'll get into with you guys. And what I found is that growing up in the city of New Orleans where, paranormal is the normal, everyone has those kind of stories. My business partner I was talking to earlier today was sharing a story with me, and people just have those stories and those encounters. And so since there's an abundance of them here, and I have a pretty strong network of people, I decided to start sharing the stories that people have been telling me. That grew into me deciding to open myself and my life up to the public and then take phone calls from people and allow them to share their stories with me and kind of vet their stories and see who's telling the truth and who's crazy and who's lying and who's seeking attention, and then turn around and share those stories again. And it's been a great journey. It really has been. I really enjoy doing it. It's a little taxing at times because you're dealing with a number of personalities, and people's personalities are different, but it's a great thing. And I made a lot of friends all over the United States and all over the world. And also, before I start, I want to dedicate this particular show to Candy Tender. There's a guy named Ron who I did a story doing a Bigfoot Bonanza. Ron was the guy whose story was he had to go through this. He was camping on the side of this railroad, abandoned railroad tunnel, and ended up being forced to walk through this dark tunnel at night to flee this clan of Bigfoots that were coming down the side of a hill. Well, Ron's lifelong partner, Candy, passed away just recently, over, about 20 days ago. And I want to dedicate this to Candy, because Candy was the reason why Ron reached out to me. Ron's a great guy, funniest guy on the planet, a biker, an American biker, chopper type guy, like the kind of guy that you want to sit down and have a beer with. So I want to dedicate this to Candy, because that's one of the members of the Dog Waters family that we lost. And if it wasn't for her, Ron and I would have never spoke, because she encouraged him to tell his story.
Very good. So what you got for us, man? What weeks?
Well, the past 2 weeks I've been pretty quiet. I haven't done a video. I haven't done much of anything. I alluded to this earlier. So the process that I have is completely different from most YouTube horror narrators. They go on Reddit, or they go online, or they'll go to Lon's website, which we discovered, and steal his story and then read his story. Well, what I do is I take the time out and I talk to people. And I've probably talked to about 600 people, close to 700 people at this point in time. And what happens is, when you take these people's encounters and take their stories, you open yourself up to this paranormal activity, because in order to really, really capture the essence of an encounter or what happened to a person, not only do you have to talk to that person once, you have to talk to them at least 5 or 6 times. And you open yourself up completely to that story that person is telling you in order to capture their emotions. And that's why I believe that my work is so good, is because I truly focus on the person as opposed to the entity, whether it be a dog man, or whether it's a Bigfoot, or whether it's a banshee, or whatever it is, or a ghost. I focus on whatever that person's going through. Well, about 2 weeks ago, I get a phone call from a lady, and I won't say her name, but she just wants to tell me these stories that happened, I think in Pennsylvania it was. And she's telling me about this lifelong family curse that they've been having, and the things that have been going wrong with their family, year after year after year after year, cancers, deaths, car accidents, all these other things. And I'm in Dallas. I'm at a cigar shop smoking my cigar, which I'm known to do, and listening to her story. And as she's telling me the story, I'm not saying much. I'm just listening. She gets to this pivotal point, which most people do when they are telling you the truth. It's a process called chunking up and chunking down. You ask these small questions to kind of dig down deeper into the encounter. So I asked her these very few small questions that get her to go a little bit deeper. And she starts talking about something happened when she was a teenager with this very negative entity, right? Very, very negative entity. And she describes that to me in vivid detail, such vivid detail that I have to pause her and stop, get her to regroup herself, and we go through my conversation about the emotions of having the encounter. And just for the record, I'll share with you guys, I tell people all the time, our emotions are the weather patterns of our body. This was taught to me by Dan Millman, the peaceful warrior. If you ever seen the movie, Dan is like, you see the movie, the character that Dan is. But to talk to Dan and to be friends with Dan is just the most wonderful thing. He's a great guy. But emotions are the weather patterns of our body, and sometimes it's rain, sometimes it's snow, sometimes it's sunny, sometimes it's winter, sometimes it's spring, sometimes it's fall. So we have these emotions, and I was explaining to her that she has to learn how to let the emotion pass over her and regather herself and then retell a story. So we go through all this, and finally I start talking to her. I finally say, okay, listen, what's going on with you and your family is a generational curse. I've heard about these before, and it's something very old. It's something that's very unnatural. And so I said, have you tracked back your family bloodline? Well, part of her family's from Yugoslavia, part of her family's from Italy. And so she's like, well, there's only one person in my family, like a great aunt that's still alive, that I can go back and track it back. So I'm trying to give this woman a solution to her problem. And as I'm sitting there, by now I have these French fries and these kind of chicken strips and French fries, and I'm eating, and I'm listening, and I'm trying to give her some comfort, this person, in some way, shape, or form. And in my mind, a voice says, you need to stop eating and you need to get off the phone right now, right? I call it the spirit of God told me get off the phone. So now I'm like, okay, something's telling me I need to get off the phone with this lady. This is not good. So I started working my way to get off the phone with her, and I decided that I'm going to connect her with some demonologists that are part of my team, Kenneth and Farrah Deal. And if you guys have never had them on your show, you should have Kenneth on your show as fast as possible. Kenneth is amazing. So I tell her I'm going to reach out to these demonologists, and we're going to follow up with her. As soon as I get off the phone with her, I throw all my food away because something tells me to throw my food away. About 4 minutes later, I go to drink some water. I had this lump in my throat that to the point to where I started choking. Now, had I been eating the food would have got caught in my throat because this is how large this lump was in my throat. So I'm like, oh, wow, that was weird. That was strange and crazy. So I go home. I go back to where I'm staying, try to go to bed that night. That night while I'm laying in bed at about, let's say, maybe about 2:30, no more than 1:30, no more than 2:30, I'm just really falling asleep. And I start to get this sensation. You know, there's this phase between when you're fully wide awake and when you're falling asleep. It's this intermediate phase. I don't know what the real word for it is. There's a terminology for it. But I start to have this sensation of this finger going into my mouth to the point to where I bite down and I feel something in my mouth. And so I'm in bed with my girlfriend, and then when I bite down, I roll over and I reach for her because I'm thinking she's messing with me or something. I just bit her. But she's completely on the other side of the bed with her back turned. I'm like, whoa, okay, that wasn't normal. So I'm like, all right, that's no big deal. Nothing crazy, right? I'm up for like another 30 minutes, and I start to settle back in and go to sleep. Again, as I'm falling asleep, this finger's going in my nose to the point where it's in my nose and down my throat and touching my throat. And I'm like, oh, no, this is something touching me. And I'm in that moment, I'm reaching my hand up trying to pull for something, and I actually feel an arm, and I'm pulling, and I'm like, whoa. So I get up out of the bed. I'm like, this is not good. I go to the balcony. I start praying because I've had over and over, I had these negative entities sometimes that would come towards me when I talk to certain people. So I go to the balcony. I pray. I pray from 2:30 to 5:30. The sun is coming up by the time I'm done praying. The next day I talk to Kenneth Deal, who's the demonologist. He gives me these special prayers that I'm going to do. And I'm like, okay, I'm not sure if I want to get into this, doing these particular prayers, because Kenneth's like, you have to be dedicated to doing these prayers, because if you skip a day, then whatever it is, it comes back on you sevenfold. So he's like, once you start, you can't stop. So I'm like, okay, I don't know if I want to commit to doing these long prayers just from this point on. I'm just going to do my regular prayers. Well, I get back home to New Orleans. I'm laying in my bed. My girlfriend calls me. She says, hey, you know, I could have swore you were in the bed with me because as I was falling asleep, I felt this finger rubbing on my face. And I'm like, oh, no, oh, hell no, this is not going to work, right? This is not going to happen. So I go into a 2-week prayer retreat where I've been praying 3 times a day, every day for the past 2 weeks, because you have to build your hedge around you when you're dealing with these kind of things. And I haven't had any more of that activity since. But it just goes to show you the difference between, you know, someone who does the kind of work that I do and, you know, you guys do when you're actually interacting with people who have paranormal activity versus dealing with a person or going online and just taking a story and reading it. There's consequences and repercussions for what we do, you know, and I never really share these things because for the most part, I don't want to glorify the entity that did it. I don't want to give it any more power. I don't want to give it any more power because masses of people believing and listening to it only makes it stronger. But at the same time, I feel like there should be some warnings in my experiences being shared. It's something that would help somebody else. So that was one of the paranormal encounters that I personally had, right, just recently. And I want to share the other ones that I've had going further back. There was this gentleman that was calling me from Canada, and he and I were talking. He ended up having kind of this obsessive personality, borderline stalker personality, to the point to where when I stopped talking to him, he would start texting me and saying all this crazy stuff. Now, this guy was in the black magic. He was in all the rest of this foolishness that he should never have been in. And it gets to a point in the conversation where I'm getting these aggressive text messages from him like, you know, if you think this conversation is over, it's not over between you and me and blah, 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 to the point to where I feel like he's threatening me. And at some point, the entertainer melts away, and the real person that people don't know kind of rises up. So the real person comes up. I call him. I'm like, hey, bro, me and you have a blanking problem. You know, And he's shocked. He's like, what? I said, yeah. I said, because the text messages you're sending me are kind of aggressive. And I just need to know if we have a problem or not. Because, it's not too much for me to get on a plane and come to Canada so we can solve it. Completely shocked the guy, right? He's like completely like, whoa, okay, this guy's crazy. And he and I come to terms to what his emotions was. And his thing was, I was worried about you because anybody who talks to me gets a visitation from this particular entity. And I was really worried about you. I said, well, I haven't had any visitations. I'm not worried about that, man. That's just not going to work. Meanwhile, while I'm holding this conversation with him, I'm sitting on my porch as I am right now. So I'm talking to him. We're going back and forth. We're getting to a better place than we were, 20 minutes ago when the conversation started, when these 3 black birds fly up and land on the power line right in front of me. At this point in time, guys, it's like 2:30 in the morning. It's not like early. So it's 2:30 in the morning. Birds don't really fly in the dark like that. And these are crows. They don't fly in the dark, right? So I rarely see a bird out at night anyway. So they land on the power line. I'm like, okay, now that's weird. But I'm not going to freak out about it. So I get up, grab a cigar nub, go out my porch door and throw it at them, and they fly off. That night I go to bed, and when I'm in the bed, I'm pretty much asleep. I'm like right after you fall asleep. I'm going into La La Land. I think I was having a dream about being a football player or something. Like I think I was on a Saints team blocking a kick or something. It was a crazy dream. It was like just completely random, most random dream you can have. And I have this feeling that someone's at the foot of my bed. And when I open my eyes, there's this figure, kind of like black but not black, kind of misty figure at the foot of my bed. And I open my eyes, and I'm like, whoa, look at that. There's something at the foot of my bed. So I close my eyes again, like, man, I'm dreaming. Open my eyes back up, it's there again. And I'm like, okay, this is getting out of hand. I get out of bed, get on my knees, and I start praying. When I look back, it's gone. And so there are these times when doing what I do becomes dangerous from a spiritual perspective if you're not prepared and you don't protect yourself spiritually, because you actually open yourself up to these entities because you're talking to people. And quite naturally, what I've discovered is that, keeping my hedge of protection very strong is something that I absolutely have to do. And so like the past 2 weeks, I think I've taken like 2 phone calls. Like people are like, Dark Waters, what's going on with you? We haven't heard from you. Are you all right? And this and this. And sometimes you have to pull back in order to protect yourself, because what I'm doing is really as a service for people. I didn't intend for it to get to the point to where I was kind of like dealing with demonic entities and all this other stuff. I still don't want to do that because that's just not my interest. But, there are consequences for each and every action. So that's some of the things that have been going on with me. And that explains a little bit, Alana, why that video that we talked about is a little bit slower, because I wanted to complete that time frame of prayer before I even started talking again. Because the minute I started talking again, I start talking about these things again,
Well, I've been through that before, and Sean can.
Yeah, you have.
Psychic attack is nothing unusual, and it's not many of the time. It's just not psychic attack; it's an entity attack, and I have been attacked many times while helping people, with their spiritual problems and such, and you can be physically attacked as well. And that's something I've told people about before. And you do need to protect yourself. And I have found that when I take stories from people, regardless of what kind of paranormal activity, supernatural activity, anything, I prepare myself, and I do protect myself. So I understand what you're saying, man.
Yeah, and one of the things is going into it, it's kind of like going back to my original Dogman encounter. When I first had that encounter, to a certain extent, there was a little bit of underestimation on my part, it was a little bit of underestimating what could possibly happen. But I'm a very quick learner, and I'm a quick study, so you show me the evidence that, you're going to screw around with me, then no, that's not going to happen anymore. That's just not happening. So that's one of the crazier things. And then, let's talk about Dogman. And I've been listening, and I've had the great opportunity to have several conversations with Miss Linda Godfrey. She is like the sweetest person on the planet. I love talking to her. And one of the things that's been getting me, and if you guys notice, and to tell you the truth, I have probably about another 50 Dogman encounters that I don't do anymore. I just won't do the Dogman encounters because it's one of those things to me now. It's getting to the point to where the monetization of the topic is starting to hurt the topic in itself. There's this over proliferation of these wild and out of the box stories about Dogman, and I just find it hard to believe that. Right now we have on YouTube about we got about 9 Dogman shows, maybe about 6 Dogman shows that are out there that are pretty popular. Those 6 shows pretty much share guests from one show to the next. Those guests are telling their story over and over and over again. And this is going to lead to another point later on. But what I've discovered is the people who've had these encounters that I've spoken to, less than 10% of them actually want their encounter told, and less than less than 5% actually want to be interviewed to a point to where they want to tell the story themselves. And so I just think that right now there is, and it's negatively affecting the cryptid genre, that because it's such a popular topic, and I think that happens with anything at some point in time, that people try to monetize it, and in the desperate attempt to monetize it and make money off of it, what's happening is you got these weirdo, crazy encounters and crazy stories seeking in that just there's no way they're possibly true. There's just no way they're possibly true.
Yeah, that fiction gets blurred into with fact, and then the stories are more artificial than they're any real emotional encounters.
Right, exactly. And what that does is for the person who's really, and I've had this, people tell me this all the time, the people who really had the encounters, the ones that I've spoken to who don't want me to share the story and that have been really negatively affected by it, it's almost like, it's kind of like, you're belittling their encounter, their experience, and making a mockery about what they went through. When we're talking about people, I have people who've been attacked physically. I have people whose front doors, the creatures come through their front doors, all kind of stuff that I don't tell because they don't want told, and they don't want it shared. They just wanted somebody to kind of tell the story. But I just find it hard to believe that weekly and daily and, that there's that much Dogman, that there are that many Dogman encounters out there that people are able to share. I just don't see where that is coming from. And I think that monetization of the topic, and Linda and I talk about this all the time, it actually is hurting the topic because have there been aggressive encounters? Yes. Does our government know about these creatures? Absolutely. Of course they do. That's just like a no-brainer, just like we know they know about Bigfoot. Have they killed people? Absolutely. Of course they have. Do they kill everybody they come in contact with? No, they clearly don't. Are they a smart, intelligent being? Yes, absolutely, because the simple fact that they can decide who they're going to attack and who they're not going to attack means that they have already transcended the mindset of a traditional predator like a lion or a tiger who says, I'm going to come and eat you because I need food. It's more than just instinct of eating food. It's something where they make a decision. And the simple fact that if it's multiple people around in the area and you do something as simple as taking hair follicles from a barbershop and you've had dogmen on your property and you spread the hair follicles around, that the dogmen stop coming because they understand that there's more than one person there or more people coming there, they leave you alone. It's those little bitty things. The same thing with Bigfoot. It's those little bitty things that lets me know that the creature is of high intelligence and it's extremely intelligent, pretty much the same level of intelligence as man. So to me, it's like the great mystery of does it exist or does it not exist? I mean, once you have, for example, you take Linda's work. Linda's has almost 20 years of documentation. You take Lon's work. Lon has years and years and years of documentation on encounters. So does the creature exist? Yeah, absolutely. It's got to exist. There's no way you can get around the fact that it exists. I think the issue really is now, once we get past the monetization of it, is, how do we protect people from that creature? The aggressiveness of that creature, which we all know that it can be aggressive, as opposed to Bigfoot, who will try and run you out of the area and tell you, get away from my family. This creature will approach you. This creature is aggressive. So how do you avoid it is the real question, and it should be the real conversation. But like I said, it's being sensationalized to a point to where it's not doing people any good. It really isn't. It's just not doing people any good.
I had to agree with you 100% on that because, the work that we're doing here in PA, it's, we want to know what the hell, and we're out there putting stuff out, money off of it. We just don't do that. And like you said, these Dogman Encounter shows that have been, and it's ridiculous. It's all over the place now. There was a time ago where you very rarely saw a Dogman encounter anywhere, right. And all of a sudden it's just popping up, and it's not that people are getting stories from people. You can tell a lot of them are made up. Absolutely, I agree with you there.
I think we have, in our own way, self-admittedly, kind of been part of the problem. We talk about this, ad nauseum, because it is interesting and it is out there. And I think when we speak about it, aside from, just trying to, the storytelling part of it aside, we're just presenting the facts of these encounters. But we're putting that information out there. We are hounding that information. So, and I've said it many times on the program, Lon, I think we own a little bit of the responsibility of some of these topics getting more and more out there and more mainstream. But at the end of the day, these are coming in, and I think we do have a responsibility to report on them.
I agree with you. I think you definitely have a responsibility to report on them. That is not what I'm saying. I think there needs to be a certain level of standard and responsibility, a certain standard level to how people handle those encounters.
I agree.
And I'll give you a perfect example. The last Dogman story I did was Dogman's Revenge, and then I did a story shared to me by this gentleman that I vetted for 2 months that shared stories with me about Bigfoot and Dogman having a fight in Alaska. But it took me 2 months to vet that man, and 2 months of talking to him, hearing his wife and his daughters and his kids in the background, talking to his friends, his family. It took 2 months to vet that story until it was put out there because I felt like I was being responsible. I think there needs to be a certain level of responsibility behind what we do and what people do. Now, that's a standard I hold myself to. I'm not going to make anybody do that, but I just have to speak out on it because if there's no certain level of responsibility as to what you put out, then it starts to create a problem. I'm going to go into one of the problems, for example.
Absolutely. I agree there, DW.
What I discovered, and this started with the last time I came on your show. I remember I started getting all those emails and all those things from people saying, Dark Waters is a fraud, he's this, he's that, blah, 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 blah. You got all those emails. Well, it seems that this particular genre, the werewolf dogman genre, has an excessive amount of people who have some mental issues associated with them. I talk to people who have all kind of encounters, right? But this particular genre has the most crazies associated with it. I don't know why. And I guess it makes sense for someone who says that they really want to go out and go into the woods and track down a walking werewolf. You got to have a few screws loose to a certain extent, right? Now, if you're going out as a part of a research organization and you're saying, okay, we're going looking for prints, and there's 20, 30 guys looking, okay, that's something that's, you guys are really a research group. You got the equipment, you got this, you got that. But for a lone wolf to go out in the woods looking for a dog, man, you have to be loose. You have to have a few screws loose, There's a couple of crowns missing from your box. And what I discovered is that in that particular genre, if we take buckets of paranormal stuff, there's the Dogman bucket, the Bigfoot bucket, the Banshee bucket, and the ghost buckets, and the voodoo and hoodoo. In that particular bucket, it seems like you have this abundance of craziness. And I believe that it's because it's encouraged because that particular topic is so easily monetized. And it really is. It really is. If you go look at YouTube and you start looking at cryptids, the top cryptid on YouTube monetization-wise is Bigfoot. The second one is Dogman. And it's rapidly catching up with Bigfoot. But if you put a Bigfoot episode out versus a Dogman, Bigfoot is going to encompass it all the time. But I just think that it's because of the monetization of it that it gets to that point, and that's what led me to the conversation you and I had, Lon, because what has to happen now is people with certain levels of ethics have to be the ones that monetize this because there's going to be some standards with it, You take a person like Linda, who's pretty much her life's work is dealing with that topic. And I've read Linda's books, and I've talked to Linda, and Linda's a great author, and she's a great person, but you take her work and you hold it up compared to some of this other stuff that's out there, and all it does is belittle the things that she says. And all it does is it tears down the foundation of a person like her and like you, it tears down the foundation of their life's work. And so you have to defend those things in some way, shape, or form. And I just think, there needs to be a certain level of responsibility. And I've sent emails to people about it in the cryptid community and telling them just how I feel about it, because we let these crazies leak in, and then the crazies get entitled, and they go from show to show, and they cause this drama and all this other strife, and it's just insane. It really, 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 really is insane, and I just don't think that's one of the things that happens behind the scenes that people don't know about.
Well, there's another thing in my instance. These production companies that produce shows for TV are all asking me about stories. They see something I'll post on the blog, and then I'll start getting emails from all these production companies. It's ridiculous. I've talked to Sean about this many times. I mean, they literally, let's put it this way. I'll get a story that is very interesting, got a lot of good content. I worked with the person, like you say, vet them, and all this. I got 3 or 4 production companies wanting to use the story, wanting me to put in contact with the person, and I won't do it. I will not do it. But the biggest problem is steal the story regardless.
Oh, yeah, they do it all the time. There's people trying to steal. It starts off like this. They contact you about the story. Then they give you a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
Then they turn around and then if you don't respond to them in a certain amount of time, then they steal the story.
That's exactly
that's a part of it. And that's a part of the game, and that's another reason why you have to monetize your own work, because that gives you a certain copyright claim to it. To when they start stealing it, it's like, hey, this is mine. So that's one of those things why you have to monetize your own work. And like in my case, I have on the table, I have a TV show, I have someone who wants to do I have like 3 movie scripts that people want to do from stories that I've investigated and this and that. And it works if there's a manipulation that they can do with you. If you're a person that's chasing money and money excites you, then you're easily manipulated. Where they're having problems with me is because it just doesn't excite me. And it's not, you can't force me to do something because you dang a little bit of money in my face. So it's one of those things to where, but that's what Hollywood is, and that's what producers do. They have to get their content from somewhere. So since they have to get their content from somewhere, the alternative media like YouTube and your blog and your radio show are places where they get that content. If they're just honest about it and they cut people good deals, then it really won't be an issue. But that's just why you have to be careful, man. You really, really do. You have to be careful.
Yeah, I mean, it really used to bug me. I mean, it got to the point, I'd listen to what they had to say, but 9 times out of 10, I didn't even want to talk to them anymore. And then they try to get you, to put the witness up, and I just won't do that. And I tell the witnesses, I do tell some witnesses that, look, if this is something that to make or have a show done about it, I don't even want to hear your story. And I've had to tell some people that I refuse to be a conduit for somebody to make money off a story. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And speaking of stories, I guess it's time we tell some stories.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I'm gonna go into some of the newer ones that I have. So I actually got permission now to use the location of some of these crazy things. I just did a video. I started doing this series called Out of Left Field. And Out of Left Field is equivalent to me just telling a story live, kind of like what I'm getting ready to do now. Because all my work is typically like this long format. It sounds like a movie. It's this real detailed production with, sound effects and music, and it takes a person on a journey. But it takes a lot of time. So I started doing this series called Out of Left Field. And out of left field was just me getting on the microphone and telling the story similar to what I'm getting ready to do now. The last one I talked about a small town in Mississippi and a lot of the paranormal activity that was going on in this town. At that point in time, I didn't have the permission from the gentleman to tell where the town was because he wasn't really comfortable. And he was like, well, let me see what you do with the stories and blah, 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 blah. And if you represent me well, then we'll move forward. We'll give you more. Well, he really enjoyed it. He liked it. And he was like, dude, you did exactly what you said you were going to do. I trust you. Now just don't use my name and my family name. So Knob, Mississippi is on the border of Mississippi and Alabama. Very, very small town, very, very rural area. And the activity that has been coming out of this city, or this little small city, and the people I've been talking to out of this city, it's insane, the type of things that they've talked to me about. They talked about dogman encounters, Bigfoots, phantom cars on the road, all kinds of stuff. So I get into a couple of those stories so we can get some good ones. One of my favorites that this gentleman shared with me is about his sister. On their property, and in Knob and these small Mississippi towns, most of the people, they have like these trailer homes. And so it's this family land, you know, where they have a few acres of land, and they clear some land off, and then they put a trailer up. Well, his oldest sister was pregnant, and she needed more space, so the family cleared some land, and they put up a trailer for her. The trailer is about 75 yards away from her parents' trailer, enough space for her to have a little privacy, but enough space for them to get to her if they need her, right? So you're pregnant, we need to get to you, we can run to you, but, you know, we're not breathing down your neck. So one night his sister is at home, she's laying in the bed, and she's about 6 months pregnant. She's watching TV. And he told me the story first, and the sister told me the story. So the first time I didn't know all more details. This time I know a lot more details. She's actually watching Family Feud on TV. She got her feet propped up on a pillow, just hanging out eating popcorn. You know how pregnant women do. They're pregnant, they get the munchies. So she's just munching, laying in bed on her back, munching on his food. And as she's watching TV, she starts to get this real weird feeling like someone's looking at her, but she's looking around the room and nobody's there. The lights are actually on in the room. The big light, like the top light, not like your nightstand, like the top light is on in the room. So she's like, man, I get this feeling that somebody's watching me, but I'm not sure who it is or what it is. And she gets weirded out, but she doesn't see anything. Well, minutes later, she sees what looks like a shadow coming down the wall, just like a black mask coming down the wall by the doorway. And as this black mask comes down the wall, it takes into the form and forms the shape of a upper torso. And she said it was like a torso with broad shoulders, and she's looking at it, and she's like, what in the hell is this? Then the torso of the shadow, the upper part, leans out away from the wall, and an arm reaches out towards her. So if you can imagine looking at a wall, and there's like a black cutout of a black figure with a torso, it's one-dimensional, it's flat on the wall, it turns three-dimensional and starts reaching out from the wall towards her bed. And she jumps up, hops on the other side of the bed, and is freaking out like, oh, my God, what is this? Trying to figure out what's going on. And the only way out of that room is to run past this doorway. So she's standing there for about a minute and a half, 2 minutes, trying to figure out what to do, to the point to where the room starts to smell, and she describes it as like a sewage smell. Not sulfur, but like, raw sewage. And so she bolts past the base of her bed, out of the door, past this shadow, which is reaching out of the wall. And she runs out of her trailer screaming and hollering. Well, her parents hear her screaming and hollering and screaming at the top of her lungs. They come out running. Her dad comes out running with a shotgun. Her brother comes out running with another shotgun. They beat her halfway between that 75-yard distance. She's like, somebody or something's in my room, something's in the trailer. They run in the trailer. When they get there, nobody's there, but on the wall where this figure was, or this shadow creature was, there's this moldy, slimy substance that I don't know what it was or what it described, but he said it was like a grainy, wet mold that was on the wall, but it was in the figure of a male's upper torso. So quite naturally, she never, ever went back to that trailer. They boarded it up, closed it up, and she moved back in with her parents. So that was one of the first encounters that happened to this particular family on that piece of property. Their neighbors, who are about a mile down, and these houses are spread, these pieces of property are spread pretty far apart. I ended up talking to one of the neighbors after I did the first story because they're like, oh, you telling the stories, you keeping people private, we'll tell you more stories. The neighbor tells me a story, which is crazy. She's in her kitchen washing dishes, and her trailer, which is, to me, I like to use the word house, but to be more accurate, I have to describe it as a trailer. It's easier for me to say the word house, but a trailer home. She's in a trailer home. She's washing dishes, and she starts to stack all the dishes in the cabinet. She leaves. She goes to the restroom to use the bathroom, comes back. All the dishes are back on the counter. And she's like, okay, I know I just put these dishes up, but I don't know what's going on. She does it again, puts the dishes up, goes to bed. Every day this lady started having this crazy paranormal activity. Doors being left open that were closed, her dishwasher turning on its own, the washing machine turning on its own, just all this crazy crap that was happening at the house. So she talks to one of these gentlemen that is not a priest but a preacher, and the preacher tells her, hey, you need to turn a recorder on when you leave your house so you can hear what's going on when you leave your home. So, okay, she grabs her cell phone, she hits record, she leaves it on in the house, and she walks out and walks down the street, right? Comes back 15 minutes later, plays the recording. You hear the cabinet doors open, you hear dishes breaking, you hear screams and hollering and crying and moaning. She played this to me over the phone. I'm like, what is that? And she's like, this is what I recorded. She's like, I don't know what it is. I said, well, what was the condition of the house when you returned? She's like, nothing was out of place. Nothing was broken. Nothing was tampered with. Nothing was messed with. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. Same thing happened miles and miles and miles away from here, up in Pennsylvania where you guys are. I had another family tell me a story where they were having paranormal activity, where things were moving. They did a recording, and the exact same thing happened, where there was this screaming and moaning and these voices coming over the device that recorded, and it sounded like the house was being torn up, but when they looked around the house, nothing was wrong. So I've had stories like that recently. I don't know what that is. Do you guys even know what that is?
Yeah, residual haunting. A lot of times, if when you get the EVP type recordings or something, even like an out of body place or something, and there's something not actually being moved, but it does sound like something that's normally a residual haunting. It's something that happened before, but kind of works its way like on a tape recorder. It keeps repeating itself. Yeah, that does happen. It's a high energy area. It will happen. Happens up in Gettysburg all the time.
Really?
Battles, places, there have been a lot of trauma and such. These things do happen. It happens visually in a lot of these places where you'll see people have seen soldiers marching, and it just repeats himself. Like on a recording. Yeah, it's pretty wild. I've experienced it myself. It's really wild.
I concur, Lon.
Well, I can tell you if I experience something like that, I'm gonna freak out. I'm telling you. Like, I was already freaking out over the other stuff happening. I can honestly tell you guys this. I was raised to fear no man whatsoever. Fear no man but God. And there's no fear in my heart of any man. I don't care how big you are, how tough you are, how rough you are. You can be dealt with. But when you start talking about dealing with spiritual forces that I can't touch, I can't fight unless it's, a spiritual battle, then that worries me. But not anymore, really, to be honest with you, because now that I understand what needs to be done, there's a much greater level of comfort for me at this point in time. But anyway, back to Knobtown, Mississippi. So another story out of Knobtown. The gentleman who was telling me the story, he goes back to when he's in his early 12 years old. This is back in the day when there was the Nintendo, which was this gray box where you had to slide this big, looked like an 8-track CD and 8-track disc in, and he's playing Tecmo Bowl with his cousin and a few friends, right? And this is one that's on the out of left field, but it's a good story, and it's actually a Dogman Encounter. Well, they're playing this Nintendo, and it gets to be about 11 o'clock at night, and it's time for their friends to go home. Well, the roadway that they had to walk home was a roadway where people had said for years that when they walked down that road along, they felt like something was shadowing them in the bushes. They would hear something walking along in the tree line as they walked. So these kids are like, hey, it's time to go home. It's late. We're going to walk halfway with you guys. And when we get to the halfway point, everybody's going to run. So it's 4 boys. They start walking out of the house. They got their flashlights. They got everything. They're headed out the door. And to their right, as they're walking out down the driveway, the guy's great uncle has a cow pasture, and he has cows out there. And so they're walking and they're looking over at the cows, just being little, young boys. They're talking, being laughing, being giggly, probably laughing more than they needed to and making too much noise because they're afraid. And they notice that in the cow pasture, there's a bunch of cows that are huddled together because they sleep together. Cows sleep standing up and they kind of get close to each other. But there's this one cow that's just way up away from everybody, all the rest of them, and it's there, but it's looking directly at them. And they're like, man, what's up with that cow? It's just like standing there. Why is it not with the rest of them? So just like a 12-year-old little boy would do, they say, okay, we're going to force him to run over with the rest of the cows. And so what they do is say, let's throw rocks at it. Just a brilliant idea. Let's throw rocks at a cow, which, I know people who punch cows, all kind of crazy stuff, right? So pick up the first rock. They go to throw it at the cow. They miss. Pick up the second rock. They go to throw it at the cow. They miss. The older of the boys, who's 12, making 13, grabs a bigger rock, throws it, hits what they think is a cow, right? Well, when they hit it, it stands up on 2 legs. And now you have these 4 boys standing in the dark with their flashlights, and this thing just stood up, so they all shine their lights in the direction of it. And when a light starts to reflect off the eyes, there's this greenish, amberish color of this eyes, and it's 7 to 8 feet tall. And they're like, oh, my God, what is this? So for a few seconds, they stand there, and they're trying to figure out what this thing is. And what I thought was most interesting, I said, man, did you get a description? Can you tell me a description of it? He was like, his exact words was, dude, all I can tell you is it wasn't Bigfoot because we've seen Bigfoot all the time. Bigfoot doesn't look like this. He said, this is like a big old wolf. And he said, it started to move towards us. He was like, but the steps they weren't normal steps. They were like these kind of quick leaping steps. And he said it was covering like 5 and 10 yards as it came towards us. So all we could think to do was run. And so he ran back to the house screaming. His older brother comes out of the front door with a shotgun because, of course, these kids are screaming, and this is a town where there's all this weird activity, so everybody's already on edge. The older brother comes out of the door with a shotgun. As they're running in the door, the older brother's coming out of the door. And that's where the story left off that I told because I hadn't really had a good conversation with the older brother. Well, I had a conversation with the older brother, and I said, well, man, I know what your younger brother saw. What did you see? He said, man, you're not going to believe this. And I said, well, what was it? He said, man, that was a werewolf. And I said, what made you think it was a werewolf? He said, because it ran and it jumped over the fence and it ran across the road and back into the bushes, into the wood line. And I was like, wow. And so this particular area has a lot of activity. And when I say a lot of activity, a lot of activity. Now, at this point in time, these stories are stories I'm telling you from when this guy's a kid. This guy's my age now. He's in his 30s. So the people I've talked to recently, they're not talking about so much Dogman. They're talking about more Bigfoot encounters, and they're particularly talking about something else that's very disturbing in this area, which is a phantom car that tries to run people off the road. And the story goes that I don't even remember the name of the roadway because I intentionally didn't remember the roadway because I didn't want people to go driving over there and get ran off the road. But the story is that nowadays when people drive down this particular roadway, especially at 2 o'clock in the morning, 2 to 3 o'clock in the morning, you will see these headlights coming towards you. And I'm talking about racing towards you as fast as you can possibly imagine, like a car is coming at you. And then this vehicle swerves into your lane to where the headlights are like someone's playing chicken with you, like someone's coming head on at you. And then right when you get ready to turn and swerve off the road, it swerves the opposite direction. But when you look over your shoulder to see what it was, there's no one there. It's not even a car. It's nothing there. It was just these headlights. I actually had an opportunity to call up to the sheriff's department and try and hold a conversation with someone there. And I was just like, hey, I want to verify if you had any weird stories or any weird occurrences of like someone trying to run people off the road. And the lady was like, listen, there's a person who handles this. There's a department for this. I'm going to let you talk to her. I said, well, look, I'm not really interested in talking to anybody. Just can you confirm, yes or no, that you have reports of, someone trying to run people off the road? Yes, all the time. Okay, thank you. Click, got off the phone. So sometimes I just want to verify a little bit deeper some of those things. I can't call them and be like, hey, did anybody report a werewolf? That's just not going to work out. That's not going to work out. But I was able to verify that particular story. So there's a lot of strange and weird occurrences going on all over America all the time. There's just an abundance of things that can be talked about and shared at any point in time.
Well, I can concur on that because I get some really strange stuff. I just like the other day I got that flying Klansman story. that where this it was a KKK rally, and this Klansman in a blue hood and cape was burning us.
So there was a flying KKK member?
Yeah, a flying wizard.
I've heard of the Flying Dutchman, but this takes the cake.
Yeah, that takes the cake. So he just, wow. I've never heard anything.
I asked people, I asked when I put it in there, can anybody give me any idea what the hell it was these kids? It was these 4 kids that saw it because they snuck up because they saw the lights in the woods and there was a clearing and they saw. This was back in the late 50s, and this guy was in his 70s. He was telling me about it, and he said he couldn't understand. He said, the hell? This thing was flying around the circle, yelling like a banshee, is exactly what he said. And so I put it out there, and some woman got a hold of it. And that she has heard of this before. She's heard of these type of magic ceremonies.
Oh my!
That have happened during KKK rallies, and I'm okay. So she's digging into some information to send to me. So I don't know what the hell that's all about, but that was a new one for me. I've heard a lot of stuff over the years.
Well, since none of us are going to be invited to the rallies,
Yeah, I'm definitely not going to be at the rally. I tell you, Lon, let's do a story from your site. Let's do this one. This is one. I thought this one was very interesting. This is the one that's coming. One of the ones coming out on video. I hate to spoil it, but the Snowman Encounter. I thought this one was really, really good. And again, I cannot say this enough. When I look at your work and I see what you've been able to accomplish, you are the equivalent, and you may not like being the equivalent of this gentleman because he's extremely conservative, but it's kind of like you're the Matt Drudge of paranormal activity because you've documented so many things. It's on that level. That's how extensive your work is. And I think that's how impactful your work is to the cryptid and paranormal genre. Because, well, again, like I've said, when we started working together, I just started researching, looking at things, I found over and over and over again on some of these top YouTube narrators, I found where they were just stealing your work and reading the story. And I was like, man, this is crazy. It's like you guys not doing any work. So the Snowman, back to the story. Get off the soapbox. The Snowman. So this is a story that I found on the website. I thought it was very good, and I really wanted to do this one. It's about a family. And I can't remember exactly what the family was because, again, I always whitewash locations. But anyway, so there's the four-member family. There's a son, a daughter, mother, father. And in this particular area, people know about this myth of this thing called the spirit of the snowman. And according to the legend that the father used to tell the kids as a bedtime story, the snowman was a part of a massacre of these people in the 1700s called the Mingo people. And basically the legend goes that these people were massacred and the snowman picked the bodies up and carried them back to this burial mound that he had, which sounds to me like a Bigfoot at the end of the day, but this is the story. Took them back to this burial mound. And every winter when it gets cold, that the snowman would come out and he would roam around the area and he would make noises. He would do all these other things. So families at home, the kids are at the table doing homework, and the dad forgets firewood. So he rushes out of the front door to go get some firewood for the house. And as the kids are at the table trying to figure out what's going on with the dad, they're like, Mom, where's Dad going? What's up with him? And she's like, oh, he's going to get firewood. No sooner than she starts talking about him getting firewood, he comes flying back in the door, grabs a chair, pushes it up, closes the door, pushes it up against the doorknob, and bolting and kind of bracing the door, goes to the cellar, opens the cellar, gets his shotgun and some shotgun shells, and comes and leans his back up against the door and tells them, hey, the snowman is outside, right? So the kids being kids, they rush upstairs to the attic where they can get to a window and they can look out of the window and see what's out there. And a few minutes pass, 5 to 10 minutes, they're out there looking and they don't see anything. Then finally they notice in a garden that there's this figure covered in all white hair that's moving back and forth, and it's squatting down and digging its hands into the frozen soil. And it would squat down and dig its hands into the soil, then it would get up and move over a few feet and squat down and dig again. And finally it started moving towards their front door, and then at the last minute it turned around and went back into the wood line. And so that family had that one encounter with the snowman, but it looks like the father died and the mother's still living on that property, and she, to this day she still hears the screams of this creature that they call the snowman. I thought it was interesting because it sounded to me like a Bigfoot. It didn't sound like a spirit to me. It sounded like a Bigfoot.
It's actually in Virginia. It was a pretty rural area in West Virginia on top of this mountain, and this Mingo people were actually an old friend, supposedly from back then. And I don't know how old that story was. I mean, as far as the snowman, the Mingo, but man, I tell you, when the person told me this story, I didn't know what to think about it, but yeah, I think it was a Bigfoot. I forgot all about that story.
Yeah, it sounds to me like it's a Bigfoot, and it was just a good story. It was a good short story, and you know, the what I like is that, again, for the purpose of entertainment, a lot of stories that I do are extremely scary because I wait until I get those scary stories. And I pass up on a lot of the regular encounters. So I can be kind of held accountable to a certain extent because when you listen to my content, it is extremely scary. But to get to those scary stories, I probably go through 15, 20 regular ones. Then I go through 5 or 6 people who don't want their stories shared to get to that 1 or 2 very extremely scary stories. And sometimes it's just best to have stories that are regular encounters because every encounter doesn't lead to someone shooting at a Bigfoot. Every encounter doesn't lead to it chasing them. Most encounters, the creature looks at them, maybe makes a bluff charge and runs them off, and that's it, you know. And so it's good that those kind of stories are out there because there needs to be a certain level of balance to the perception that people have when they're dealing with these creatures. Because if they're perceived the wrong way, then a person can really get themselves in danger. Like going out and say, oh, Bigfoot's going to kill me, I'm going to start shooting at it. Well, it's definitely going to rip your arms off and beat you across the head with them if you start shooting at them, right? If you're just going about your business, it'll probably leave you alone. So, you know, perception is a big thing in the public's eye. And again, that's one thing I like about your work is because it's just the encounter. And some of them are scary, some of them are just regular. And it's just one of those things. So.
Well, DW, I appreciate you coming on with us again. And, you know, we got to get you back on here. Maybe we can get you on a regular basis every few months or so, and you come on with us. And we can catch up on what you're doing and just sit down like this and talk. I mean, this hour was a whole lot of fun.
Yeah, it was. I appreciate it. And I'll be more than happy anytime. I will be very, very happy to come back. And just so everybody knows, the next Bigfoot Bonanza video is a collaboration between myself and you, and it's stories from Phantoms and Monsters blog. And it's actually very, very good. And it's good because I've been not doing anything for 2 weeks, but listening to it over and over and over. Sometimes I think I'm like Dr. Dre, the producer when it comes to this stuff, because I'll sit there and listen to it over and over and over and be like, nah, that's not good. And I'll start over. So this one is very good. People are going to really enjoy it, and they're going to love it.
Looking forward to it myself as outside looking in on this one, guys. It's fantastic. I enjoy what you do now. I can't wait to hear this collaboration with Lon.
Thanks, Sean. I look forward to talking to you guys again, and Anytime you're ready to have me on, I'll be back.
Well, we really appreciate you coming on. Thanks again, DW. Folks, Dark Waters, check them out on YouTube. Lon, Butch, anything else for the night?
No, I'm good.
Next week, though, we've got a very interesting show coming up. We will be talking about the Zozo Phenomenon. New book just came out with Darren Evans and our friend Mary Ellen Guiley.
Yes, I snickered. I don't know why Zozo sounds just like I don't know.
Well, it's it's had to do with the Ouija board.
Oh, damn it!
So,
how can you?
And
do
I
this?
read the book. It's an excellent book. This gentleman Darren, his encounters were quite interesting. In fact, his story was on Ghost Adventures as well. So this week.
Excellent. So next week we'll be having those two on the program to talk about Zozo. But a quick programming note, folks, you can listen to us live every week here on Spreaker, Spreaker.com/ForkerMedia. I'm going to try to get all our past shows uploaded to Podbean and Stitcher. There was a disconnect for a little while. So if you can't listen live, we'll have all the archived shows loaded up here in the next couple weeks. So stick around with us. Always a little bit of editing and everything else that needs to go along with it. We provide you with this show each and every week free of charge just because we love you. And it is a labor of love, so just keep that in mind. It's not always perfect, but we do our best to bring you continual entertainment and factual encounters. I think that's the one thing we pride ourselves on, is the ability to talk about these great phenomena each and every week, bringing you some of the best experts in the field, as well as some of the best storytellers in the field. So I've got no more to say on that tonight. It's been a great show. Always a pleasure to have DW on the program. Thanks to our folks in the chat room. Dell, Marcos, Junior, the lovely Shannon Legros, and everyone else that joins us weekly. We're so glad you come in and chat with us. There is a live chat during the show. Other than that, again, folks, thanks for joining us tonight. Butch, thanks for joining us. Lon, a pleasure as always. We'll catch you next week, folks. Good night, everybody.